Hey guys, and welcome to a new video here on the Shreducator YouTube channel. My name is Daniel Knorr, but if you want you can also call me the Shreducator because that's what I like to do. I like to shred. But today, sadly, well, probably not sadly, but fortunately, I am here not to show you some shred, but to show you the best computer, PC, Mac for music production in 2020. So, without further ado, let us take a closer look to the thing. That's it. That little box, which has like the same size of my spread fingers, is what I would call the best, computer or Mac for 2020. And there are a couple of pretty good reasons for that. So just to make sure that you guys know what I'm talking about here, this is the Mac Mini from 2018. So why would a almost 2 years old computer or Mac be the best choice for music production, which is a pretty demanding topic for a digital unit? Why would that thing be the best choice in 2020? Well, first and foremost, the price-performance ratio, because that is like for most of us, the best and most important argument to buy something. So I guess that most of us, including me, do not have unlimited financial resources. Obviously, this is not a cheap piece of gear, but compared to, other pieces of gear that do have a comparable performance output, this guy really just makes a race. So I just bought that thing for 1,050 euros last week. So I was basically pretty lucky because there was a relabel, someone bought it and sent it back to the distributor. But if you're buying that thing regularly in Germany and Europe right now, it starts for like 1,100 euro when you're going for the cheapest version that has an i7 CPU. So that is definitely what I would recommend you. The cheapest version has like 128 gigabytes of SSD space, and it has 8 gigabytes of RAM, which are pretty weak values, but we will talk about that later. Why it is important to take the particular model with the i7 CPU is because this is the only thing in that model range that is capable of doing hyperthreading. If you're not familiar with that topic, hyperthreading means that there are, in this case, 6 physical cores, but by using hyperthreading technology, the processor or the CPU is generally capable of adding 6 virtual cores to the game. So that means that you're actually having like the performance output of a CPU that has 12 cores. And even though the i3 with its 4 cores and also the i5 with its 6 cores do have pretty good performance output in that price range, I would definitely recommend you the one with the i7. Because if you're really doing like intense audio production, you will need that for running plugins. I do run plugins all the time, so FX plugins, for mixing all that stuff. I run guitar amplifier simulations, and they are pretty demanding for the CPU, so it definitely makes sense to go for the i7. Why you should definitely go for the i7 version, is showcased by this benchmark. So this is a Mac Mini benchmark where you're comparing all the Mac Minis with each other. And the Mac Mini I was working with before was that one, so it has the i7 of the 3rd generation and also worked pretty well, but just from a single core benchmark you can see a pretty significant difference here. So also with the multi-core, which is a way more important benchmark, the difference is around the same thing. So this has like double the performance that a Mac Mini from 2012 or 14 would actually have. So as you can see, also the i5 and the i3 clock in pretty high compared to other Mac Minis, but that is a pretty significant difference. And since the Mac Mini with the i7 is really just like $200 more expensive than the one with the i5, you should definitely go for this one. So yeah, I really hope that this kind of comparison helped you guys. Concerning RAM and also, hard disk space, these things are pretty easy to upgrade. So I just want to make clear that you cannot upgrade the internal SSD or hard drive because it is attached to the main board. There's nothing to change about that internally. However, since we're living in 2020, there are some really good choices for external hard drives and also SSDs out there. I'm currently working with a 4 terabyte, storage external hard drive, which is not the fastest on the market, but it really works for most of the stuff I do. But in the end, its main job is to be a storage. But even though I can't do everything in Final Cut and Logic, I have sessions with 80 tracks and there's no lagging or whatever. But if I just want to make sure that everything runs smooth, I also have a external SSD. So if you want to have that extra bit of speed for your data, what you can do is just directly, buy an external SSD. There are some great choices out there for 150 bucks or whatever. But if you want to save some money, what you can do is just, buying an hard drive adapter case that works with USB-C. So then you can just, put in an internal SSD into that thing, and, internal hard drives or SSDs are always cheaper than external ones. Another thing that is upgradable internally, though, is the RAM. So Apple really charges a lot of money for them to upgrade the RAM. So I just bought the 8GB version because you can just basically upgrade it yourself. There are a couple of really detailed tutorials here on YouTube that, really explain how easy it is to change the RAM. And since this thing has 2 slots, you can upgrade up to 64 gigabytes. I went for 32, which is way more than enough for me. Anyway, you do need some pretty special screwdrivers for the whole thing, so just make sure to watch a tutorial and get all the stuff. I spent 12 euros for these pretty small screwdrivers, and for 32 gigabytes of RAM I just spent 110 euros on Amazon. So let's say you're getting 32 gigs, which is enough for the end of the days. Then you get just an external storage hard drive with 4 terabytes for, let's say 100 euros, and an external, SSD for also, let's say 150 euros. In my case, still in the end, I ended up, spending less than 1,500 euros for the whole thing. And if I would get the same thing from Apple, it would be way more expensive. So, that is a pretty good option how to get this thing on a limited budget. And also there are some guys who always complain about, Mac being pretty expensive compared to a Windows PC with, competitive performance output and hardware. And I always felt that this is a pretty serious point. Though I just, because I was curious, I just, went to the internet and built a PC with almost the same specs as the Mac Mini, and it was not actually way cheaper. So that pretty, still I'm wondering about that, because that always was a thing with Apple. They are selling their stuff way more expensive because it is Apple, but as it seems, that is not the case with the Mac Mini. As you can see, I tried to go for the cheapest version of a really competitive PC, and as you can see, the result is really competitive. So the only difference is that I added the 32 gigs of RAM directly, because it just makes sense. But as you can see, I still have the 120 gigabytes SSD, and I always went for the cheapest option that would work out. So just cooling unit pretty cheap, all the stuff pretty cheap. I mean, that is a processor the exact same as in the Mac Mini, so I can't change that. You would need a certain mainboard to make all these things run, so that is always the cheapest option you would go for. So as you can see, this is really just the same price, but we do have to mention that this PC would not have any USB-C slots, so that would be an advantage of the Mac Mini.
and it really is the same price. Like as you can remember, I mentioned that I bought my Mac Mini for like 1,050 euros, and I upgraded the RAM for like around 100 euros. So that is really about the same you would pay for a Windows option with all the cheapest parts. So I highly doubt that the RAM and the internal SSD is like the same quality as the ones that Apple put into their system. So yeah, I mean, considering the pricing point, that is pretty much also a pretty good argument for the Mac Mini, isn't it?
And if you really want to have Windows on your Mac, you can basically run it on Mac as well. So there are also some tutorials on YouTube and all across the internet that will show you how to do that. Just a moment before, I recommended you guys to get a USB-C hard drive adapter. And that leads us just to another point, which is connectivity. So even though this thing is pretty small, it has like 4 USB-C or Thunderbolt 3 inputs. It also has like 2 USB 3 inputs if you're just having gear that is not ready for USB-C yet. And it also has an HDMI input, which comes in pretty handy for most of the screens. The Mac Mini also comes with an Ethernet input. If you want to have the fast one, like when you're using, fast service and stuff with like 10 gigabits or something around that, that will cost you like an extra $100 euro or whatever. So it's not the end of the world, but pretty unnecessary for me since I just work here on my own. And of course, since we're in 2020, it also has a built-in Wi-Fi card. So that is pretty much all you would need to connect most of the stuff to that. However, if that's not the case and it's not quite enough for you, you can also buy an adapter. I just bought one for like 40 euros which has a couple of USB 3 inputs, another HDMI inputs, and SD card reader and all that stuff. And that's actually a pretty cheap upgrade that might make sense. Talking about that kind of extra gear, that is also a thing that makes this guy relatively cheap. So let's say you want to buy a MacBook or even an iMac or something like that. It is obviously, like, if you want to have the same power as this guy, it is obviously just way more expensive. Because I guess that the most expensive thing about an iMac is really is like the 5K screen you got there. So that is not cheap for sure. And if you're buying the iMac, you always have to pay that, and there's no other option. While when you're getting the Mac Mini, you can just make it run with like an old screen or just not an expensive screen of your choice. And since I'm doing like music most of the time and also some basic video editing for YouTube, I don't really need a 5K whatever display. I just, use the thing that I've been using for the last 5 years since it just works. So I don't want to talk bad stuff about like the iMac screens. These are awesome, but not everyone needs them. And also all sorts of other gear like, the keyboard or whatever, Magic Mousepad, which is included in a MacBook, for example, and is not included into the Mac Mini. So it does not come with anything. Just have the Mac Mini, which for me is a pretty good advantage. Some guys tend to complain about that, which I don't get, because if Apple would put a keyboard and a mouse and all that stuff into that, that would make the thing way more expensive. So, I mean, I have a rather old Apple keyboard which perfectly works for that thing, and I mean, it's a keyboard, so why would I upgrade to that? And my mouse is also, I bought that when I was like 12, so it still works, and I've never, seen any reason to change that. So, that's what I still use today. It works, and you can actually just buy, the cheapest keyboard on Amazon. It will probably work, and that's why that really makes sense for me not to deliver that thing with Apple mouse and Apple keyboard. And since this thing supports like the newest version of Mac OS, it also works pretty good with like any external hardware that would require drivers or all that stuff. So I bought a new audio interface, and it does not even require like any drive. It's just plug and play, plug it in via USB-C, and it works without any problems. And you know, that is another topic, but also for music production it just makes sense to have Apple. Not only because of the exclusive software opportunities that would come up, for example using Logic Pro X, which is the DAW of my choice, but also since, you know, the Core Audio, I think it's called Core Audio, the audio driver of Apple, is like, you know, basically top of the notch. So I really feel that it's way easier to work with that than working with like Audio or whatever drivers. If you are not convinced yet, let's just take a closer look to, you know, some benchmark tests, because I was really surprised by how good this thing came away, you know, comparing it to way more expensive, you know, iMacs and MacBooks.
So guys, talking about the Mac Mini all the time, I just use mine to show you some benchmark tests. So that is the guy I'm talking about all the time, the Mac Mini Late 18 with the i7 of the 8th generation, and it clocks in pretty good comparing it to, you know, some guys that are way more expensive. So you know, something that is quite a little above that is the MacBook Pro from 2019 and the iMac from 2019, and you know, it's not like that there are worlds between that, so there's like not a really significant difference, but there is some. And you know, something that is pretty surprising is that this thing beats like way more expensive you know, units with like even an i9 processor from 2018, and which is, you know, pretty impressive for that small of a, you know, Mac unit. So as you can see, this thing also plays in the same league with a MacBook Pro from 2019, which has 8 cores and the 9th generation of the i9 processor. So that is really like way more expensive hardware than that. And you know, just looked that thing up 1 second ago, and if you want to buy that one with the i9 and with the, you know, same amount of RAM, you will end up spending 2,500 euros. So I'd say that, you know, from the same money you can like buy, if you do it like me and you upgrade the RAM and all that stuff yourself, you can like buy 2 or even 3 Mac Minis for the same money. And you know, as I said, it plays like in the same kind of league when you know, taking a look at the multi-core benchmarks. So obviously like the Mac Pro is way better, but you know, this thing with the 28 cores, I think it's like $60,000 or something, so not competitive at all. If we're going for the single core performance, this thing even clocks in a little higher. So that is where it is. It, you know, just leaves the i9 of 2019 and also like the Xeon processor for the Mac Pro behind, which is pretty impressive. But obviously there are some processors that are even capable of a little you know, more performance. But as you can see, the single core performance, which is actually not that important for music on audio production, you know, is also not pretty, like there's no significant difference. It plays in the same league, I would say. So yeah, that is pretty impressive values, I guess.
So let's sum up. Awesome price performance ratio, awesome connectivity, good benchmarks, in general just a pretty good price. I mean, that thing just rocks. I mean, it just works perfect for everything. I did not have any problems. Once I got it running, I did not have any problems. In the end, I can definitely recommend you the Mac Mini late 2018, even though it's like 2 years. Well, not 2 years, but just like 1.5 years, because it was released in like October or something in 2018. Though it's not the newest release of Apple, it still makes total sense in 2020, and for me it's, you know, just the best choice because of all the arguments I just explained in the last like 20 minutes or whatever. So that's it for today. I really hope that you did enjoy this video. So you know, be sure that the next video is about shred again, as you're used from me, but also I felt like that is a pretty, you know, important topic for the guitar and also the music community in general, so I just felt like doing a video about this. Anyway, if you want to see videos like this in the future, or, you know, some more guitar related videos in the future, make sure to subscribe to this channel, to leave a comment. So if you want to see a video on a certain topic, I would love to do that if I find the time for that and if it makes sense for this channel. You know, leave a comment with anything you would like to, like the video, share the video, do all the good stuff that makes this channel grow. And if you even want to support me financially, you can just check out my Patreon page, and you know, that would, everything of that, like just even a like or a sub would really mean a lot. So that's it. Thank you once again for tuning in, enjoy your time, and you know, guys, see you in the next video. Shit, mate. Well, over the top. Almost. That's it.